Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to our next episode on the Sing to Thrive podcast. We are so excited to welcome back Darren Deojee again for part 2 of Words, Spells and Power Sounds.
Beautiful. Thank you, Maddie. So everything that Darren brings is through the power of living words and the oral tradition, where we don't just use sound, but we become it through using the mysteries of tone and timing, inflection and nuance to nudge words and sounds to bring us new vistas of perception and understanding. This really helps to yield new states for us to inhabit through our words that we can then enjoy and share with others. It's very important. Darren also specialises in guiding men on transformative journeys into masculinity and ancestral healing. Thank you for that, Darren. We're very appreciative. Through a unique blend of ancient rites, modern insights, and courageously confronting the unknown within, Darren empowers men to uncover their strengths, inner strengths, cultivate resilience, and forge deep, meaningful connections. Welcome, Darren. So happy to have you here.
So much for having me back, to be honest. Yes, it's great to see you both again, and it's great to be here.
We had a fantastic response after the Words, Spells and Power Sounds. And what we want to talk about today is something that came out of a conversation that we were having around the language of the one. And I was fascinated because I did not really understand what you were talking about. And so Madeline and I are keen to learn, and so will our listeners, because again, this taps into the type of words we're using to truly create what we want in our lives, because words do cast spells. And of course, all of our work is around singing mantra.
And with intention.
Yeah, bringing in what you want. And it's so much easier to sing something and get into that high vibe feeling space. So I am excited to hear what you've got to say. And there's part of me that I know there's one song where, oh no, but I asked you about that. You have the power. So anyway, I'm not going to speak anymore. I want you to talk and to teach us all.
So what is the language of the one?
Darren, the word alchemist.
Good morning. Thank you. And you're right. This is a spin-off from just a casual comment in a conversation that we had. And I'll be honest with you, I've only ever shared this in private conversation before. I've never shared it with a group.
Ooh.
So this is news for people out there, but it's not new. It's stuff I have been working with for many years with people, but I do consider this to be quite advanced spelling. Even though it's super simple, and I call it advanced because you kind of have to have a level of already have a sense of sensitivity within yourself about how certain phrases feel differently when you make very small changes to what you say or how you say it, but having some level of sense of, oh, that is subtly but profoundly different than how I feel, or I can experience that those people received that in a very subtly or profoundly different way from when I tried it in this way before. So that's the only reason I call it advanced, is some level of sensitivity is already kind of required to get the most out of this. But it doesn't mean you can't benefit from it, and others around you can't benefit from what I'm going to share with you today. Anyway, without that sensitivity, you can apply the mechanics of this and still get the benefits in the spelling sphere, because
I'm hearing the word self-awareness. I mean, this will just build more self-awareness about how we use our voice and our sounds and what we speak to ask for something or to,
Yeah, totally. And I think by picking particular things like this, like what we're going to look at today, that have very distinctive differences in how it feels, it's a really good experiment for people to play with and to just, bring in every now and again to notice the differences that it might make for them. And again, it just helps with that self-awareness, a bit of clarity over the effect of your own expression and communication. It's all good, really, in that respect, then, isn't it? Even just for contrast and perspective, to try something out different can give you a slightly different sense of what you normally do anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, I was just thinking then I'd like a sip.
Yeah,
Dancing
and
away.
my morning coffee getting into me here. Um, so another reason I think that's quite useful for this particular topic we're going to look at today is that some people might have already come across Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication.
I'm sure many have.
For those that haven't, nonviolent communication is a fascinating body of work. The guy who founded it, Marshall Rosenberg, he's got schools around the world, and while you may not have heard of them, it's because his schools are all in war zones. Literally, they're in war zones, and it is his NVC, which is what they call it, nonviolent communication, is to help people be able to sit with others where there's extremely strong feeling. He's got examples where he's got two people in the room where they've killed each other's sons, and he's trying to have people have a conversation with each other without feeling attacked, you know, and to realize how much veiled attack and accusation is in our language without being aware of it. And that's the whole premise of NVC is, oh, perhaps you're not aware your everyday language is loaded with violence. And if even though you may not intend it, others will be feeling this violence, even though you're not aware it's in your language, and they're going to be coming back at you as if you've attacked them when you haven't. And you didn't mean to, but they're feeling it because inadvertently your language was attacking. Even though you were innocent of that and you were ignorant of it, it doesn't change the effect. And
It happens
NVC
many
is
times in
completely
my
based on that.
childhood
Yeah.
And
where,
in my adulthood.
yeah, where you just say things in that defensive manner, or even, and you don't mean it to come out the way that it does.
Absolutely.
I was
But
saying
often,
to Madeline, sorry,
go on,
Darren, I was saying to Madeline
go ahead.
today that often when I'm speaking to a client and if they've, whatever situation they're in, I will always refer to, well, when we behave in a certain way, this is what we end up, this is what results, this is what we end up
Yes,
manifesting because we all behave. We've all got the same things going on. We're all
exactly.
healing and evolving and growing, and this is just a different storyline, a different picture. But I'd love using the word we, and I've done that for a long time because people they get less defensive if you start saying, well, because
Exactly.
when you do that behavior, this is what happens. It feels like blame and guilt. Whereas it's
It
all right,
is.
well, when we do that, because I've done it before too, this is
Yeah,
the result. That's
absolutely.
what
I
you're
mean,
talking about, isn't it? With this,
yes,
yeah.
exactly that. It's 100% that. And even you, Maddie, when you were saying about reacting defensively to somebody when you didn't mean to, and it's because they didn't mean to, but they attacked.
Right.
You defended because they were attacking, and neither meant to do it, and they just didn't realize it was in the language. And there's lots of different aspects of that, and people that want to study it, Marshall Rosenberg is the top of the tree. And that's the place to go. You might as well go right to the source on that one. He's the guy who is the master of it. But we're going to be looking at one particular aspect in it that he addresses a little bit of, and we're going to go deeper into the subject of it because he didn't talk about one necessarily, but he talks about the problematic phrase that we're looking to replace here today, and that is you. And so really what we're looking to do with the language of one and the one is to get rid of to eliminate the violence of you. And I mean that in more than the one ways that it sounds, and that's intentional. The language has it built in for a reason. And so Marshall really was the first to introduce me to this notion many years ago that the word you is violent. And when he first presented the idea, I was quite shocked. It was news to me, the genuine news that the word you, because I was always saying things like figurative speech, like when when you're walking down the street and then this happens and blah 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 and all this sort of stuff. So I was forever using things like that, phrases like that without being aware of what it was doing in terms of presuming, accusing, projecting on another person. And the amount of presumption and assumption that is in the statement you, it's loaded with all sorts. And really, I think we touched on it last time because obviously you is related to the broken vowel we were talking about last time. So that's actually the mispronunciation of that vowel is to call it you, which is othering. So last time we spoke about how the word that is masquerading as the character of you is an accusation or an othering, which is to say you, which is an other, basically. So it's an othering process from the sound, which in its purest sense, that shape, the sound of you, is supposed to be oo or which, as I think we spoke about it last time, didn't we?
Yeah,
Did we
because
speak
Yeah,
about
that's right.
yeah,
Yeah,
when we
but
sing,
say
we
it
sing.
That's
again.
right.
Yeah.
Ooh, exactly. So our ooh is our sound of pleasure, and our is our sound of effort. And
Yeah.
so we have this situation where our sound of pleasure and love and connection and of effort has been replaced with this othering, with this accusation of you. And today we're going to look at how to remedy that in a really simple way. And it's so powerful because it's so simple. And it really changes how our phrases and statements feel when we correct it, because we're no longer othering with you, which is there's a feeling that goes with that.
Yeah.
There's a feeling that goes with you, that it's not until you replace it or consciously replace it that you start to notice how powerful it is in terms of dumping on somebody. It's incredibly
Definitely.
powerful.
Mm.
Yeah. And for anyone that maybe isn't aware of that, just think about yourself when somebody said to you, and it's always like, how can you not feel sort of like
Yeah,
me?
it
You
feels
know?
Yeah, it often
Exactly.
feels attacking.
Did you see me?
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
others
It's attacking or
projecting
blaming.
projecting their
Yes,
aggression.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So these are all the downsides of it. So in Marshall's work, he approaches it from just to replace, to swap out you, to own it with I. So instead of a you phrase, he would say I. So the way NVC really works is kind of to reframe what would be an accusation. You made me feel angry. Something like that.
Yeah.
You did. Right, and he would say, well, let's reframe that and say, when you did X, so the objective thing, I felt. So when you were late for my performance,
Yeah.
I felt sad and unimportant, rather than you made me so sad at my performance because you were late.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
you know so one is saying, oh, this thing happened and I had this experience,
Yeah.
and the other one said, you're responsible for my experience. You're the one that made this experience
Yeah.
happen. You made me feel this. And so many people are unaware that our everyday language is laced with this. It's
Totally.
laced with it.
But it's also lack of emotional responsibility. It's like what we learn doing PAC, the past experience and healing work that we do. It's like no one ever makes us feel anything. We
Yeah,
we, we either get triggered by past trauma or belief systems, but ultimately it's a choice. We're choosing to react that way because of whatever's happened in our past, and it's like if you're blaming someone else for that, then you're not taking emotional responsibility for
Mm.
your reaction. You're
yeah,
reacting, so it's
yeah.
your
Mm.
it's your responsibility.
Absolutely. But what I've found with people is that I've met people who have that awareness and still weren't aware that their
100%.
language wasn't conveying that. And so it became, oh, and then when they find out, they're genuinely bereft. Oh, I didn't realize. And it's like, of course you didn't. You weren't aware.
Yeah,
That's the point of this work of
mm,
bringing vigilance and awareness
that
into
next level.
the phrases that just run off our tongues. It's just habit. We just run off without realizing that, oh, my intention was sharing, connection, empathy, all that. And I'm moving from there, but the language framework I've been given is all clunky and deformed. And so actually I spit out of habit the spell that has all these distortions and ignorance built in,
Mm.
and my beautiful intention to connect that came out so yearningly and so well intended ended up producing a frown on your face and I could feel the contraction in your body. And then all of a sudden I'm thinking there going, why are you frowning and contracting when I was seeking to share understanding or shared experience or something like that, and people just not aware that all that's wrong is the arrangement of the spells and the spell choice, the word choice. It really is that significant, and it doesn't. And this is the point: is people will always say it's the intention that counts, and it's like yes, of course it's the intention that counts. However, the spell will still be received.
Yeah.
You know,
Because why? Because it's creating everything's energy. So
yeah,
it's
that's it.
creating a sacred geometric pattern that is still there.
Yes,
The
like it
way
or
you've
not.
spoken that language, that spell, those
Yes, like it or
sounds.
not.
And so that's in the field, and that's what we feel, and that's what's communicating with us.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's part of why, yes, intentions are obviously very important, but knowing these tricks of the trade really, because we don't learn this at school, and I mean, the
No,
last 3 or 4 generations, the whole schooling system's been manipulated. So,
totally.
what is it as easy as that? Really, just taking out you and replacing it with an I, which is again what Matt was
In
saying,
certain
taking
cases,
responsibility for
yeah,
this is how I felt
it is.
when this happened.
Yeah, I mean, for some things, it is that simple, and and it sounds like it's simple, but the difference in feeling
Mm.
is absolutely astronomical. And I know people that cannot do it at first. They can't do it because the feeling is so easy to say. You know, when you're walking in the street and then you fart in public, ha 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 ha, rather than I know how it feels when I walk down the street and I
Yes.
fart in
Yeah.
public.
So just
That is a completely different feeling to
Yeah.
saying, oh, you know, when you walk down the street and you fart in public. We're
totally.
not talking about you farting, we're talking about me farting.
Yeah.
But I'm making it about you. And I
So
chose
just to
farting in
go
public
back
on purpose there. It came out
on
of
the
nowhere as the perfect example.
It is.
but to
Yeah.
go back to the example you used before, when you said like when you were late, I felt this.
Yeah.
You're still saying you in that sentence. Like
Yeah.
Yes, yes, but when we're saying that, what we're doing is we're not, when we're saying the you in there, and we'll look at how to clarify that and make it even clearer in a bit, but I was just using how Marshall, like just a simple example. But what we're doing there is we're separating out an objective event from a feeling.
right.
If you
Yeah.
separate the objective event, so here
Right.
is the thing that
So when you
happened,
did
and there's
that,
no charge on that.
I felt
And so
this.
there's no charge on the objective statement. It's like, okay, it's objectively true that you turned up at 8:15 instead of 8. Okay. There's no feeling about that.
Life.
You turned up at 8:15 instead of 8. That's fine. But then I felt this.
Mm. Okay, cool.
And I'm not saying you did it. You didn't do it. All you did was turn up at this time.
Yeah.
That's independent. Then separately,
Yeah.
I felt this.
Yeah.
And without even knowing what you're teaching now, we actually do that mainly because I've been learning PAC, the past stage clearing and healing, for 24, 25 years now.
Mm.
And we know that it's not okay to project blame onto each other.
Doesn't stop it 100%
No,
of the time.
but it's like, well, when you were late, it's like, this is how I felt. And so, but we've always done that from a different standpoint, so
I
we're
think-
not blaming.
I think there's
Yeah.
definitely been awareness, but I think what has been the issue with us is that like we actually haven't potentially changed the language. Especially
There's
when I was a
definitely room for
teenager.
improvement.
When
Oh,
I was a
yeah.
teenager, it was carnage.
Carnage.
Yeah, of course.
Utter
Of
carnage.
course.
But I do think, even though I was learning and had a mentor at the time who was all about the word responsibility and taking responsibility for your emotions, I think because of the way that we spoke to each other, it
Yeah.
charged
Definitely.
the suppressed anger that we both had from
Yep.
completely unrelated situations.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting point.
And I think I've got quite a few clients at the moment, and that mother-daughter or mother-son or parent-child relationship, the kid just knows, or the parent knows how to push a button. We
Absolutely.
just know. And I think that this language can be really helpful for parents.
Yeah, for
because
sure.
Yeah.
I noticed when, actually, this is interesting. A friend of mine, beautiful friend, an Indian woman, Rita, she taught me, she said, oh, if you ever want to get out of anything that you really don't want to do, because you don't have to give them an explanation, just say it doesn't feel right. And when I started saying, oh, I'm not sure, I need to sit with that, it's not quite feeling right, can I let you know? Then that would give me time to then sit with, do I really not want to do this, or is it okay? So I felt so empowered when I had that language, because I felt like I had my own back then, because I had something that I could say. And I feel like that's what I want for people listening to this. What are phrases we can have in our toolkit to say if your child is rude, or if your neighbor, whatever, and you just know how to come back with a open-hearted response where you're setting a boundary, but you're still being loving and not attacking.
And this is where the language of the one comes in for me. And it is over here in the UK, it's viewed as, it can often be viewed as sort of like aloof or snooty or posh or superior to speak in the language of one. You know, when one does this, you know, the Queen's one, as it were, the royal one.
Right.
And it's viewed as a superior thing, but actually, it is, in my experience of working with it now for a few years, it is the most advanced, the most mature, and the safest way to speak about charged subjects. And that is that, so where you would normally use you to replace that with one.
Okay.
When one walks down the street and one farts in public, you know? So the point there is, now look at that. I could have said you, and I said when you walk down the street and you fart in public, that's about you. I could say when we walk down the street and we fart in public, but I'm still presuming
Yes.
good experience.
Yeah,
I'm
for sure.
presuming it. No doubt about it. Now, I might be able to safely assume it's happened at some point in your life, but from a spelling point of view, in accurate spelling, it is a presumption, 100%, and it's bad spelling. Bad spelling, unless it is certain, unless you have shared that experience. Oh, that time, Maddie, when we were walking down the street and we both farted at the same time. That's a shared experience that definitely happened.
Definitely
Yeah.
did.
See the difference? Which, by the way, it definitely didn't happen, but there we go. We've
So,
never met.
so give
As
us
an
some more
example,
examples. I need
yes.
more examples.
So we
Yep.
do need more because you need to see the difference and feel the difference. Because if I say, let's have an example of something else. And usually where this proves itself to be the best is when you're talking about really charged subjects. That's why I use something embarrassing there. But also really charged subjects where it's about quite difficult shadow parts of self or which are shared between us, but it's really difficult to raise it, especially if you've definitely seen that quality in somebody, you've seen it in yourself, you've seen it in them, you feel it's being called forth in you to raise it in some way. But how do you do it without them feeling that you're finger pointing and then you don't want them to get defensive or to counterattack or something like that? This is where one comes in. Because if we're talking now, and we talk about, you know, you know, if if one engages in violence, who am I talking about? The one is all of a sudden in between us. You is definitely you. We is definitely us. I is definitely me. One is whoever chooses to identify with it.
Yeah, I get
It's
it
like
now.
it's between us as a choice. When one is walking down the street and one, finds violence bubbling forth, whatever it might be. I should have drawn a list of examples for this. I actually almost, when you sent me the link, I was like, do you know what? I might need a bit more time to prepare on this one because I need some more examples. Then I thought, do you know what? Let's wing it. And that was why
You're
when you
creative.
told, yeah, it was like, come on, let's wing this. So the point of it is, though, just even in your mind now, For anyone listening, let's pause and try a few phrases out in your own mind and notice the feeling, even without saying it out loud, of what it is when you did that, when one does that. Say it a few times in your mind to see if you can feel the difference. Maybe even if you've got a live example with somebody, let's just spend a moment doing a few examples
I
like
can
that.
give you an example from a
Go for
client
it.
this week
Do
where
it.
this person moved out of a house and she got a really scathing, attacking messages from the landlord saying, you know, you didn't clean the toaster and you didn't do this and you didn't do that. That was literally the toaster was one of the
Yeah.
things. And so I'm wondering, all right, if just say I had a property and I rented it out and someone moved in and then they moved on and I've gone in there and it's like, whoa, what's the language you can use then to say it?
Well, the problem there is that sometimes, there is a place for accusation. And this is where you comes in. You is the accuser. It's what we use to accuse. And so if you are accusing, it is the right phrase to use.
So
And
what
it's
you
right for that person to feel like it. Sorry?
right. So what you could do though to still take emotional responsibility would be like, when
Yeah.
I got
I
to the
was a
house today
yeah,
and saw everything in disarray,
yes,
it made me
yes,
feel like you don't respect me and my
exactly.
and
Yeah.
what I've provided for you for however long for this rent
And it
period.
is such about expectations and being able to speak up, even when someone
All about
moves in
expectation.
and saying, all right, well, what
Laying
this
the
is what I
boundaries
expect
first.
here if it was my property.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is our
Yeah.
expectations. So when you move out, please make sure this is and this is done. But that didn't happen. And so that was actually one of the core things for this
Yeah.
client to work on. It is around communication and
Yeah.
being really
Yes.
clear on even being able to say back to somebody, okay, so because if just say someone's got like a lot of expectations that are like, and
Yes.
you might be and because obviously my advice is, okay, we need to stay out of judgment here. And just because that's what that person wants, and you've got to respect that. So it was like removing the judgment from it and just saying back to them, okay, so just so we can be really clear here, can you just let's list clearly what your expectations are so I can make sure they're met? Because even using that language, they will
Yeah.
hear, oh, I've got expectations, because you're just being honest. All right, what are your expectations?
It also gives someone a chance to explain what they are without needing to. Because I feel like a lot of the time, for someone like myself, I would have expectations around something, but wouldn't always, I would potentially feel guilty about them and then about setting that boundary. So I think there's those layers of emotions that you go through when you go to set boundaries as well.
Isn't that self-judgment?
Awful, isn't it?
Isn't that self-judgment
Well,
though?
but it's
Well,
deeper than
this is
that.
it. It's deeper, exactly. This is where our spelling touches into all the aspects of our sovereignty and our right to be and our right to take up
Exactly.
space and our clarity of expression. It touches all of it. And that's exactly what you're starting to get into there, Maddie, is you
Yeah.
can't begin on this journey without all of a sudden touching everything to do with our presence and purpose and right to be
Exactly.
here in life.
Yeah, and who am I to have these expectations? Like, as a child, you learn that, what you want potentially isn't what you're going to get. So, yeah, you just learn these habits and then you stop asking. That's been my huge thing the last couple of years I've been working on is one, asking for what I want, but even before that, what do I want? I didn't even ask myself what I wanted because I didn't feel like I deserved it or was worthy of it or whatever, which is that deeper
So
belief
huge.
systems and layers of life. And it's things that we all have. So, which is why I think so many people struggle with communication.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
Yeah,
Because
and
It's
you've
massive.
that's
gone
what.
back to some real fundamental stuff there
Yeah,
around
exactly.
being here. And then it's like, well, how did we get here? We were just talking about a little bit of language, but it's because it's such a because it's because it's something that people use so unconsciously.
Right.
Once we start to become conscious of it, we start to see how much sensitivity, feeling, and awareness is locked in it. And then it's like, oh my goodness, if only I knew. And as you said, Maddie, then it becomes part of just the journey of accountability and learning curve. And as a child, the learning curve is, oh, when I spill hot drinks, it burns. When I trip, this happens. Adult learning curves are, oh, when I think I'm deftly wielding these sounds, they can actually cause harm or not have the desired effect. And if I want to be a skillful human being that's having the effects I want to have, then I need to apply some care and some vigilance to becoming more skillful with this in the same way as when I was a toddler and I was told to stop hitting my sister because I was just doing this with my arm. When I wasn't hitting her, I was like, hey, I've got an arm, it does this. That was the reality of it. But I learned, oh, maybe learn to temper that hand a bit. It's no different to us learning, hey, I've got all these words and oh, look how good my expression is. Sitting around the coffee table up until we're 35, until we suddenly realize, holy smokes, I've been cursing myself and others and sabotaging my relationships and pointing fingers at everyone. No wonder I don't have the relationships I yearned for. No wonder I don't have the connections. But this is adult learning because that's where the sensitivity and we've got to have had some consequences first. You've
Yes.
got to have actually caused a bit of harm, be a bit surprised by some of your own relationships, scratching your head going, what did go wrong there? What did actually happen there?
Yeah,
I've
but
got the
it's the
feeling, but I
questioning
don't know
that's
what they
important,
mean.
right?
It is the questioning.
Yeah.
Yes. That's the difference. That's the adulting. The adulting is the willingness to question and the willingness to look.
But it's interesting because like yes, these are adult lessons, but it's also unlearning the and rewiring those belief systems. Because until you do that, you're going to have the emotional triggers, and it's going to be hard
The
not to
memory
react.
sits in the cells,
Yeah.
it's in the
So
fascia. We've
yeah,
got
That's why it's adulting as well.
Yep.
so interwoven, isn't it?
Yeah.
whole
The
body.
reparenting required because for any of us to be able to dare to be our vulnerable, sensitive truth in the world
Yeah.
requires someone to hold a loving, caring space for that courage. And no one's going to do that but the one in you.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
let's do a few more examples of using the word one.
Okay, so there's
instead
two.
of you.
We've got two ways of using it really, and really they're both different forms of the same thing because one of them is one is when you are definitely referring to so if we're talking about oneness, then oneness literally means everything is one, which means that nothing is separate within it. So when we're speaking from oneness, that's part of it. So then how do you refer to a part of that one? Well, this is where the language comes in. I is part of it. So I is referring to this part of the one. I. And funnily enough, I, the shape that we use for I, is the same shape that we use for the number one. It's just a line.
Oh yeah.
Aye. And I do loads of work on that on gender. This is all gender work actually, but realistically, I and one are synonymous, really, ideologically. But so we've got this one, which is the shape we use for I, which is referring to this one. So we use I for referring to definite personal experience or definite possession.
Okay.
I. Yeah. I did this. I felt this. So I'm not presuming you felt that. This part of the one felt that. Whenever we're referring to shared experience or another is when we use one.
Yeah. Okay.
That simple. Yeah.
So if it's
So
I, you pretty much use I, and if
If
it's
you're
anything
talking about
else,
yourself,
anything else is one. Yeah.
everything else
Right.
is one. Okay.
Yeah. And so it's then a case of it's dead simple then, because then I'm only using I for when I'm definitely referring to my own stuff. Anything else is one. And you don't have to use it all the time. The point here is when we're dealing with sensitive things and you want to tread carefully and you want to have a connecting experience around something sensitive that if you said it with a you, the person is going to feel accused, they're going to feel pointed at. And that's when throwing in one just so softens it. It softens it completely. You know, when you get angry and this happens, when one gets angry and this happens,
Mm.
you know, it's just who is being accused? Nobody. And then you can, then no matter what the topic is, and this is where I find it difficult to come up with examples. And I often, people ask me this in the gender work all the time, and they'll say to me, well, give us an example, give us an example. And for me, it's like, I don't deal in what ifs. If somebody can give me a live example of something that's happening, then we can look at it. Because contriving this stuff doesn't work because it's all about how it feels. And
Yeah.
that's why it's better to like even say to you, even just say a few phrases yourself in your mind and feel the difference between you this and one this. How does
Mm.
it feel?
Yeah, because I was just, when you were speaking then, I was thinking about when I'm like teaching singing, and I remembered some of the things I said this week. I was like, okay, so you want to make sure you do this, or if you're doing it this way, you know, I try, I'm gentle in my approach, but I definitely said, you want to make sure you do this. I'm like, okay, maybe that's, and then
Yes,
I've started switching it to go. So when I do it, I'm focusing on this. So I think that is a good angle to take with that, drawing on your personal
yes.
experience.
That's a good idea.
But then the other way
Yeah, I like
is,
that.
yeah, I was just thinking in my head, it's like, okay, so when one wants to sing a high note, you know,
Yeah. Or what you
it
can do
just
then
feels
is
so
you can say
weird.
anyone. You can say anyone.
Anyone.
Okay.
Anyone.
Okay.
So anyone compared to you. Anyone.
Right.
Or you can do one, but it is going to feel weird. And what you should find is I want you to go with that weirdness
Yes.
because it's going to take you, because what I want you to follow, the words are irrelevant. If you follow the feeling, it will change your poise. It will change. So try it again. So let's use that example that you had. You had said, let's use a live one. You want to make sure you, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got you want to make sure you. So we've got two U's in there.
Two.
So we can get rid of that's okay though, because I use it as well. You know when we always have to use two U's to weave it back to an I. That's the point. It's so interesting. We always end up using two U's when really what we're trying to say is I. So you want to make sure you. So we could either do. So what is it you say after that? You want to make sure you
Well, if we're talking about singing, it's like, you know, let's just use one of our techniques is open the back teeth. So you
open
want
the
to make
back
sure
teeth.
you
You
open
want
your
to make
back
sure.
teeth
Okay.
to, yeah,
Okay. So what you could say is
create more
anyone.
resonance tone.
Anyone who wants to really smash this exercise or anyone who wants to go deeper into this exercise,
Love it.
try to really open your back teeth.
Yeah.
Anyone who
Oh,
wants to.
Okay.
There,
yeah,
there is
anyone
that
who
word.
wants to go further or anyone who wants to take this to the next level,
Yeah.
anyone who wants to go a little deeper, try this. Now, say that out differently now. So let's try them. You want to make sure you open your back teeth. Anyone who wants to go a bit further, try opening your back teeth.
Yeah.
Feel completely
Completely. It's totally different. It's
100%.
totally neutral.
And
A
just to go,
100% neutral.
just to pick your brain on another context.
Oh,
So
let's
that
have
would be
them.
perfect for someone I've never said that to before. But a lot of these
Yes,
students are coming back and back and back, and they need reminding to open their back teeth.
yes,
So it's like,
yes,
okay, you know you need to open your back teeth.
So
So
remember,
it's like,
yes.
you could. Can I have a go at this?
But that one's okay. But remember, sometimes there is a place for the accusation.
okay,
And this is the point is by having our full tool set available to us, it means that we can be selective when we use it so that it's then appropriate. And people will feel the appropriateness of it coming from you because you're using other language the rest of the time.
yes,
So what will mean is if you're using I in one generally, and then with somebody you've worked with before, you suddenly go, and you, Betty, you know, open your teeth. She's not going to feel necessarily attacked because you've got existing relationship.
right,
You know what I mean? And you've
yeah,
mentioned it before. And
yeah,
so that's where, because it's almost like knowing. So like if I've got guy, so I'm going to use physical example here. if I've got guys who have been doing encounter works where we're doing like physical, like meeting each other physically, like clashing horns, but it's not fighting, it's encounter. And what will happen
Verbal
is
or
when guys
physical?
Is it, yes,
physical, yeah.
physical.
So what
Okay.
happens is when these guys are getting together in the beginning, they'll kind of there'll be a bit of jostling around, but usually there'll be a lot of taking care because they're getting to know each other.
Mm.
But once they get to know each other a little bit, they might rib each other or they might, go a little bit further playfully because they know each other. They've got relationship there and they can dig each other a little bit. And we welcome it because it's like, really, the point of a safe space is that we can have our blind spots and our weaknesses called out without it being used against us.
Mm.
That's
Oh,
the key
okay.
point. That's what a truly safe space is. It's like you can call it my blind spots and my weaknesses, and what makes this safe is that you're not going to use them against me. That
Right.
Yeah.
simple. And so in a
But isn't
way,
that what people
it's
do in a fight? You look for weakness and you use it
but
as
but that's what we do with the
self-defense.
guys is what we call this defeating the animal because it's the animal that wants to dominate. Or so what happens is you only find, and you'll notice this in your own conversations, by the way, we all have an animal in us that needs to be mastered if we want to be human. And whenever we are in conflict, there are two energies that are animal that rise in us that we have to master. And one of them is the rising urge to dominate.
Mm.
And that happens in conversation, the rising urge to dominate. And the other one is that when we're feeling challenged is rising panic. And what people do to defend themselves out of rising panic is usually not the best response. And so what we
Yeah.
do with the guys is get them to watch their own rising urge to dominate and rising panic. And to say, well, if you can spot it here, look for it in your everyday engagements. Look for it in your conversations and in your debates where there's an animal in you that doesn't want to be seen to be weak. It wants to be on top and all the rest of it. And unless you're aware of it at the human level, it's going to sabotage your situations. But that was a bit of a
Mm.
segue there. The main point, I wanted to use that
But it makes
example where,
sense.
yeah, and when you are in your situations with somebody that you know, and I know, I don't know about you, but when I'm in a sound group and I'm sounding with people that I've sounded with before, which isn't exactly the same as singing, but it's close enough, I can hear the
Yeah.
individuals in the group. I can feel them. And so I know who to like poke at if I need to. And if you've got that sense, then trust that and act on it. And feel free to say and to even name the person if you need to, if the relationship is strong enough. But that's the one where,
Mm.
and in a way, this is the point of all of this, is once you've got that sensitivity of feeling, then all of a sudden you've got choice. Whereas before there was no choice, you could only say you. Whereas now when you've got sensitivity, it's like, oh, is this an I? Is this a we? Is this a you? Is this a one? Oh, what's the appropriate term here that's going to allow my spell to have the desired effect?
Mm.
Because it's about realizing we can use all of them rather than being limited to just this you. But when we start to bring in one, I, we, you, and we use them in different places, you can feel the effects.
Yeah.
Start to
Yeah.
use them more specifically. Because when you want to hammer a nail, the best tool for it is a hammer. And so sometimes when you need to say you, the only word for it is you. But
Yeah.
if you're using you all the time, it loses its power. It means you don't have another
You
choice. So
know?
everything is loaded up in it. Exactly. Everything gets loaded into it. But when you
Yeah.
start to bring in other language choices, not only are you giving yourself a much broader repertoire in terms of feeling, as you noticed earlier, Julia, in terms of how differently it
Mm.
feels saying it, but you're also just giving yourself a massively expanded repertoire for seeking connection with others without it being triggering volatility or
Mm.
defensiveness or something like that. And it just takes practice because it's one of these where it's not a theoretical exercise. It is about how it feels. And as you said there, it's like you almost have to say a few phrases in your mind, noticing the difference of, oh, what happens? Even sit after this session and sit and run them through in the same way
Yeah.
as you might practice song lines. Run them 5, 10 times. What does it feel like? What's the difference when we do this, when you do that, when
Mm.
I do that? What does it feel like in the system? And this is what I meant when at the beginning when I said this is quite advanced spelling, because you need to have that level of sensitivity to what's happening in your body when you make sound like this. And once you're doing that, the body is not going to lie to you. It's totally clear, as you felt, Julia. As soon as you practice a few times and you throw one out there compared to you a few times, all of a sudden, the beautiful spacious neutrality of it just fills the space.
And
And
that's the
as you said,
word.
Maddie, it's a bit weird to get used to it because all of a sudden it takes us into a different space.
Yeah.
Well, you just said a beautiful word, neutral. I mean, it's bringing everything, keeping it neutral.
Keeping it neutral.
Yeah, keeping it neutral.
And especially and another reason why I think that is so important at these times is so that's my dog snoring in the background. That is not me farting in public.
Sure, Darren. We can't see
Yeah.
the dog.
Where was I? I got distracted by my dog noise. What were we talking about there? Oh yeah, it was one. What was I going to say about it? Completely forgotten what I was going to say. I got distracted by my dog.
Great. Well, can I
Where
pick your
were we?
brain
What
with
did you say
another
last?
context?
Oh,
So, what if someone is accusing you of something and they have not much self-awareness, don't know anything about nonviolent communication? What's a way you can kind of not take ownership, but kind of
yeah.
steer the ship without punching them in the face?
Got to breathe it in. You got to breathe it in. You got to buy space with breathing.
Okay.
It's like you got to buy the room because what you got to manage in yourself is your own automatic response.
Yeah, okay,
Yes,
right.
because that's the trigger
That's
that's the
the
most
thing.
Which is
important.
That's the
what we're
bit.
talking
And
about
if you can
before.
breathe until that wave crashes,
Yep.
the wave of your own nervous system response, that wave it's going to rise. It's going to be used to you acting on it in terms of defend, deny, whatever it might normally be. I'm under attack here. Respond. Wait until that wave crashes in yourself. Breathe through that. Notice it. Be aware it's going to come. Oh, they don't know what they're doing. Wow, I was going to bite back there. Internal dialogue. Whoa, I almost bit
Yeah.
there. Breathe
Right.
it. Pause. Wow. Then respond. But this is, I mean, we must buy time and space. It's the only remedy. Honestly, I've spent so long in the crucible of strong feeling. The only remedy is time and space. And if it's really charged, if they're bringing with strong emotion as well, take 2 to 3 steps back.
Yeah.
And not in a bold way, but it's amazing the difference of how much we can receive from another in terms of the intensity of their charge
Oh,
if we have a bit more
absolutely.
space.
Yeah.
And all you need is 3 more feet, and all of a sudden something that would have been like, I can't really receive this because I just feel like you're offloading on me. All of a sudden, 3 steps further back, you can be like, wow, I can take this from you, because I know this is not about me. I know this is you releasing something, but from this distance, I can take it. When you're 2 feet away from me, I feel like you're dumping it on me, sort of
Well,
thing.
that's interesting. I've
Space
never
and
Yeah,
thought
time,
of that.
vital.
that's true.
I've never thought of the space.
The physical space.
It's
Because so
vital.
much of the work that we do is if I recognize immediately if I'm reacting, it's something unresolved within me. And there's been times where a sibling might have accused, blamed, because I had the script growing up of it. I get blamed for everything. And then if you keep attracting that and you're perceiving through those filters, so you just get blamed for everything. And when that started to shift was because I was shifting through healing the core belief systems and the emotional pain that was caught up with all of that. I was really releasing it from the body. And this particular time that I'm remembering, it was really attacking. And I was able to just say, that was never my intention, and I'm not responsible for the way you feel. Like I'm sorry, but you're projecting onto me. I was able to say just there and then you're projecting onto me. And I think that's powerful if you've got enough self-awareness to discern, hang on, this person's projecting onto me. That's not my stuff.
Yeah.
And it was said with calmness but with a firm boundary because it's like, hang on, no more, I'm not taking this anymore. And once we do set that boundary, often we're energetically different because we've experienced ourselves speaking that
Yeah.
way. So then we've got a lived experience of it. And then energetically we're different. So then we stop attracting that in.
Yeah.
And the neural pathway is different, but so is the physical, emotional,
It's,
mental.
Release.
I mean, it's pure energy work at that point. That's pure boundary energy work, which is
Yeah.
it's gender energy. You know, it's the gender energy of acceptance and non-acceptance, which is feminine, masculine, and we oscillate between the two. Most people have wounds in relation to it.
Yeah, for sure.
But just on that point you were mentioning, especially around the sibling thing, because the sibling is the best, the most charged relationship anybody will ever have is a sibling one.
Some of
You
my
know, because
clients are going to love this
forced
conversation.
to be in a crucible together. You're forced to not have space.
Yes.
And that's the point, you
Oh,
know.
wow. I never thought of it that way.
It's all about that. And so
Yeah,
in a
just
way,
space.
so we have we're actually as a species we're going through a space initiation, and we have done for about 20 years. We've been going through it. And it is the next and this is a real we're going to go into some new territory here for most people today, and it is that most people aren't aware that so you know the chakra system, the energy bodies, you know, the
Yeah,
kind of
yeah. The
yeah.
chakras.
And
Yeah.
for people that don't really buy into them, even if you don't buy into the energy centers, they are physically corresponded in that all what in the energy work they call the chakras or the energy centers are actually all the places of the maximum nerve nodes in the body, and they are the places of um, great vulnerability and pervasive impact. So even if people don't buy into energy stuff at all, there's a reality where, let's take the root chakra, for example, coccyx. So if I hit myself in my leg, I only feel it in my leg, I only feel it where I hit it. But if I fall and hit my coccyx, then I have this pervasive effect for days. And it's the same for each of these energy centers, is that they have this pervasive effect. And so they have elements associated with them, as you know, and qualities and all the rest of it. And so as we're going through them, people are okay with the elemental associations. So you have root chakra earth, second chakra water, third chakra fire, fourth chakra air, then it stops. And then after that, people are like, oh, communication and da da da. There's no, once we get beyond the heart, we don't really have as much data. And that's because not as many people have gone that far. Just in genuine evolutionary terms, not as many people have made it to the temple, which is, we call it the
Yeah.
temple for a reason. Most people haven't made it to the temple in terms of their consciousness journey. They don't even know what it really means. So for a lot of people in the last two generations, really, we've been moving from the third to the fourth center, which is we're
Yes.
moving from
Into
the
the heart.
consumer, motivated by desire, which is where the gut comes from, hunger, desire, craving, digestion, consumption. This is really where the civilization and the species has been moving from into the heart, which everybody knows. You nod like almost the cliche.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The last 30, 40 years, people have been talking about the heart awakening, which is great. And the heart is wonderful because it's inclusive, just like the element air. It penetrates everywhere, it pervades everywhere. It's like, you know, before in my guts, we're totally separate. In my root chakra, our bodies are definitely separate. But when it comes to the air, when I breathe in, there's no barrier between us. There's not one single physical barrier between the depths of my lungs and the depths of yours. This is that oneness that the heart space brings. It's like there is no barrier, no barrier there. That's phenomenal, but it is blind. It's totally blind. And the blindness of love says, we are all one and we love. Therefore, it's fine for me to rage right in front of your face. It's fine for me to come and stand next to you and be there for eternity. When actually, within 3 seconds, you're going to be like, excuse me, mate, this actually doesn't feel so good anymore. Yes, love, yes, oneness, but we need something else here. And this is where we get to the next center. And the next center is actually the next element. We're built like the planet, which is you've got earth, water on the earth, fire, air, and then you have space.
Yeah.
Oh,
Space. This is the space body, and the only thing that moves through space is the word.
sound. Yeah.
That's it. It's the word. And that's why there are no organs here. It's only the sound, because that's all that can pass into the temple. It's all that can pass through. All of this is left. But actually, to master love, you need space. It's
Yes.
like
Yeah.
Andromeda
On
and
all
Beetlejuice love
levels.
each other. Andromeda and Beetlejuice love each other so much, but only when they bump into each other once every 70,000 years. Other than that, it's just too much. You know, they're just too intense. And so what happens is space is what governs all relationships and keeps love alive. And that's where what we have in all of the constellations is electromagnetism, which is gender, that governs the closeness and distance of relations. That's the rhythm of the tide. It's the rhythm of relations. It's the rhythm of sex. It's the rhythm of all things, which is closeness and distance, and that pulsing thing is what stops any of us from hating each other. And what ends up happening is when we're stuck like this all the time, familiarity breeds contempt. We end up hating each other. You know, it's a bit like saying, would
Become,
sex be good if all we did was that? No, you need to move, movement,
become
space.
so
Sorry,
enmeshed.
space, man.
You become so
Sorry.
enmeshed. You become enmeshed with each other. And the other big thing from my own experience is it's so healthy to be able to go off and do your own thing and then
Natural.
come back. Then you've got things to talk about. But
That's
this,
the natural rhythm.
yeah, that's, and I'm
And
just understanding that as you were saying,
yeah,
you go, yeah, you go out into the
that's
world,
it.
you come back together, you
Exactly.
connect and
And
talk.
that is what keeps all relationships healthy. And in one of the poisons of sort of colonization that happened was this notion we need to be like this.
Yeah.
And
All
every
the
day
time.
we should be like this. And then we end up hating each other
And
because there's
like,
not enough space for the
Do you
love.
think that was part? This is, sorry, Maddie. This is me being a conspiracy theorist. Do you think that that was a deliberate programming by either just
Yes
that?
and no.
Yeah.
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yeah, yes and no. I do think that. I think there's an element of, I mean, as in what level of consciousness brought it to bear. I'm not sure how volitional it
Mm.
was. So I think there was an element of control damage coming in there, especially when we look at how those that were bringing in the rules were not living by those rules themselves. You
Oh,
know, that's a
that's
really
right.
important detail.
Exactly.
That's a factor. Yeah, 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 exactly that.
and
And it's a huge factor that
Mm.
this issue of space and love. And sorry, just to finish on that point, because I realized it was a tangent. The point is the point of the importance of space, especially now when we all have so much sensitivity that's come online, and you know, to know that, and this is where the maturity comes in, because if we know we're becoming sensitive and we can see that so many of us are unskillful with our energies, which we are emotionally
Mm.
and mentally and sexually, you know, then what is how do we compassionately deal with that? Do we make demands based on our expectations of what a relationship and skillfulness should look like? Because that's what we're living in right now.
yeah.
Or do we make room and space for the fact that it's really difficult to be a skillful human being with strong feeling? Really difficult.
Isn't it?
I've tried to be. I've tried to be skillful with anger. It's really difficult. I've tried to be skillful with sexuality. It's really difficult. I've tried to be skillful with sadness. It's really difficult. And if I can be the level of honesty that I can bring to myself over that is the measure of compassion that I can and space that I can give others for their unskillfulness, which, to bring it full circle, helps me manage my response when I'm dealing with people who are coming at me with their yous, which is where you started off on this, Maddie. And
Yeah.
so physical space is the greatest gift you can give yourself and them if you are dealing with strong feeling that needs to move, that should move, and that you want to enable the other to move, but you're struggling to hold the space for them. The best
Mm.
thing you can do is physical room. And it'll feel weird at first. It'll be like, you're 8 feet away. It feels a bit weird, but that's just because it's new. But let's go for it. Let's go for it. Go. Vent,
Yeah.
share,
Yeah.
and enter into that new space together. Because honest, I do with my kids, and the difference they have in their conflict
Oh,
resolution
definitely.
Mm.
with having them on 6 feet apart in the room, using COVID for our benefit, saying, remember the COVID thing? That's about that distance. And the difference when they notice and they can feel the difference
Yes.
of not feeling as threatened by their sibling. It's like,
Wow.
this is the resolution
That's
space. You can
fantastic
bring
advice
your
for
anger
parents. Yeah.
because really the mature person knows I have a lot of anger that I am unskillful with. I need to let it out, but I don't want to dump it on you. I don't want to give it to you because I know it's not as skillful as I want it to be. So we're stuck until we have a remedy. What's the remedy? More space. Because when you're 10 feet away, I can rant and rave and do all this, and you can observe and hold it without feeling like I'm doing it to you. And
Yeah.
honestly, to give yourself that, it's phenomenal. The space and creation, oh, it's so beautiful. And then you're able to actually fulfill the offer to your loved ones of, I can hold the space for you. I can hold your feeling. But from there, if you're right here, I've got no chance. And this is another animal thing we have to overcome because the animal wants to go nose to nose. So the animal, when there's strong feeling, it wants to go closer. The human has to rise above that and be like, I feel the animal wanting to fight. Right. Breathe more space into that. Don't give in to that animal and let's run. And I've still got the same feeling. It's alive and it's surging, but it's held in a much more upright field. And then it's this uprightness that goes with it that's so exquisite. And if we can get into that, the amount of space we can hold for others and receive from others, the amount we can let others rant and rave unskillfully to really let them pour it out and be free of it. It's
Yes.
such a beautiful thing to give,
Exactly.
because otherwise we're also contained. We're saying, well, I'm going to express my anger, but only when it's in this really socially acceptable, contained thing that I don't want to cause harm.
It's such a fine line though, because for someone who's really good at suppressing anger, it's like, okay, what's the difference of me holding that anger and still feeling it or tamping it down a bit and suppressing it on in some ways? It's like that's some real discernment there. And if you don't have
Exactly.
self-awareness,
Exactly. And do you know what? There's no
tricky.
way through that. There's
Yeah.
no way through it except through it. There's
Yeah.
no way.
Can I just say though today, because I was extremely stressed with technology platforms, and then I was doing something and something broke, and then I'm like, and because we're in a house that doesn't belong to us, and this thing broke, and I'm like, I just lost it. Oh, but Madeline you held space for me.
Yeah, but I wasn't the one being angry.
No, I was being angry, but normally, not normally, but often we can do, well, what's wrong? We kind of get involved and then it's,
Yeah,
but you just let me have a hissy fit and then I got over it and then we started laughing about it. But what's
That's
interesting that
process. That's real process.
that was, I felt very grateful for that. Today, because that was helpful.
It's also not feeding drama.
Yeah.
Right? It's like so many people are so addicted to drama.
Yes, I agree.
That you want to be a part of something, someone else's.
Or you want to feel
struggles,
alive.
You want to feel included in something, I think is underneath that.
Yeah.
It's
All
like,
of these things.
it's like you really want to feel included. And just before I forget, just going back to what we were saying before, I was thinking about this whole space component. If you think about evolutionary biology, especially with men and women in these two genders, like the men would go out and hunt for food and the women would, gather whatever. We did. Whatever we did. Things. Lots of important things. That's time apart. That's space between potentially multiple days.
Weeks even.
Yeah, exactly. So months.
Yeah.
Might start.
Well, you never know.
You never know.
A month are war-based. War-based stuff months, but otherwise through the year. Right.
But for food.
Few days to a few weeks would be normal.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally normal.
So how interesting, like I wonder if we then took those kinds of gender roles, not in the same way, but I mean in the space component.
Yes.
Yeah, like is living
I advise that to all my clients. Yeah, I do it to all my clients. I ask them to build in time away from each other. And it's because, and it's not just one way. So, for example, the men might have gone out to hunt for a week, but then you might have gone out gathering for 2 weeks because the patch that where you harvested was 2 weeks away.
Yeah.
And you might have a gardening party going with you, but really that's still time apart. And then after hunter-gatherer, even when we settled, you would be traveling away to harvest or to market. And so
Yeah.
again, it would still be the
Of
same thing. You would
course.
be away for a few days or weeks at a time. And I love the fact we've got figures of speech that sum it up. And we have familiarity breeds contempt on one side, and its counterpart is absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Oh, yeah.
They
Totally.
are actually, they're paired.
So I guess
Paired.
it's not so like stringent of like, okay, don't live together. It's like just allocate this time apart.
Halt it.
It's listening.
Halt it.
It's
Yeah,
listening.
wow.
It is listening.
It's listening to
Listening to your
yourself. Oh my God,
relationship.
I need space.
Your
He's starting to
relationship.
drive me nuts. I need
Yes.
time away. And going and doing your thing and coming back and falling back in love. It's like, oh, it's
That's it.
so good to be
That's
home again.
exactly it. And
Okay.
this is again about responsibility for feeling it. I noticed it with the kids growing up, where, as in my kids, and when they were very young, obviously noticing that they don't have the words to express what's going on, and often they didn't even have the awareness.
Yeah.
They would just be acting on a sense of something. And I noticed a lot of the time when there were meltdowns happening, it was because they didn't know that they just needed a break. That was all it was.
Yep.
And it was like, physical. And I would physically intervene and be like, I can see that you guys don't know that you need space here. I'll just take you away and we'll go and do something else. It was amazing to notice, but it's so interesting that what they needed was space, but how it manifested was lashing out at each other and ranting at each other and attacking each other. But actually, what they were really saying was, I need space. They just didn't know how to say it. So, how many of you in your relationships, your body is telling you, I need space, by
As
acting
you're
out the
speaking,
same way you would have?
I can think of so many times in my life.
as you're speaking, all I'm seeing is the energy bodies clashing.
Yeah.
And
That's
it's
it.
about the energy of where we're at. And we so need to have space because we come back to ourselves.
Exactly. And it is
And
love
then we know
making.
that's
It is
me.
this
That's me
rhythm.
feeling that.
Yes, it is. And if you take responsibility for that, then the rhythm of the kind of like the non-physical body love making in your relationship, which is the same as physical love making, which is it's close and then it's distant, and then it's close and then it's distant. And that's what makes it feel good. Because just this doesn't feel good, and just that doesn't feel good. You know what I mean? It's like, and within your
Yeah.
relationship, it's like in your own love making, you're the ones who decide the rhythm of how your bodies come into union. It's the same in your relationship. But if you can realize that those feelings are telling you the same thing,
It's
it's
a
time to
form
pull
of
away a bit.
communication.
It is. But
Yeah.
what's the problem we've got is we haven't calibrated our bodies. And so we think that the signal we're getting is telling us something's wrong.
Ah.
And the number of relationships that I've worked with is tragic.
That
The
is an
number of
aha
relationships that have
moment. Yeah.
ended because somebody, oh, there's something wrong. It's like, you've just
They
not got the
needed
But
rhythm of your
space.
pulse.
that's
That's
the
all it is.
blame. That's the
Oh,
blame.
it's so
You're blaming
tragic.
them
Yes.
How you
for how
feel.
you
It's
think
your
they're acting
fault.
Yeah.
when everyone just needed a moment.
When one just
Everybody
takes
just needed time.
themselves away on a hike or on a
Exactly
nice
that.
weekend
Or
away,
a 3 hour
one
Exactly
surf
that.
session.
or a
you
3 hour
know?
surf session, one can recalibrate and realign with their own heart
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
with what's important for us, because often we get caught up in, if you're living with someone, what they need, or depending on what your childhood programming or past life programming
Yes.
is, you
Yes.
will be acting that out, either rescuing or pleasing or whatever's going on for you.
Me, people
So
pleasing.
Survival strategies for
Yep.
being stuck, for
Yep.
being stuck with somebody.
Yeah.
That's literally it. You know,
Yeah,
rather
instead
than
of
this.
making the space and saying,
Yes.
oh, I've got a beautiful,
Because that would stop you from feeling stuck if you made space.
It would.
oh,
You
I
wouldn't feel
know
stuck. Yeah.
I've got these beautiful friends, Julia and John, and he always went on a, out bush trekking, and then she'd
Yeah.
go and do something, and they're always just doing these great trips, and then they come together and do other trips. I never saw two people so in love, honestly. because they did all
Got it.
this stuff apart, but then they
Yeah,
came together and did things together,
yeah.
and I,
It's so
it's
simple.
it's
And here's the
beautiful.
other detail as well, because again, when we talk about expectations and the stories and the spells that we make up based on our
Yes.
expectation,
Yes.
the idea that people
Oh,
have in their mind that if I say I'm going away for a few days, that means there's something wrong.
well, it feels like rejection.
Exactly, that's what I mean. This is the
It's like,
encoding on the expectation level is so deep,
yes, you don't want to be with me for
phenomenal.
3 days. What do you
Yeah,
mean?
exactly. And
Yeah.
there's so what's wrong with us? Our relationship is broken. Oh my goodness, we
Oh
can't
my
cohabit.
Lord.
Oh, every day. That means we're not right for each other.
I should
It's
send this to my
total
ex, this
nonsense.
conversation.
It is space, and I mean, he was a massive energy, beautiful person,
Because you need space.
massive
Massive
energy.
energy needs massive
Oh my
space.
God. And
Massive
yeah,
space,
I was
no
just thinking that
space.
because
Oh my God.
energetically, just this like
Yeah,
avatar.
that's
And
it.
yeah,
If you
Yes.
feel that with somebody, honor that and honor
Yeah.
it in yourself. If you give the space, you can still be an amazing relationship, but in a way, we are moving, we are evolving into a new way of being with each other. I found it really interesting just around the COVID thing, just in terms of like positives. Like there's always spiritual positives and everything. And I
everything.
Oh,
really
that was another
saw
time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
COVID was the absolute graduation of the space initiation. And it was basically saying, none of you can stand in each other's space. You must live with yourself and the world that you've created. Can you cope?
I love it.
And so they
It's true.
couldn't.
No,
They
no.
couldn't. And I love the word that corona. Another meaning of the word corona is crown.
Yeah.
The corona of the sun is its aura. And I love the fact that really
Right.
our corona of ourselves is about 6 feet. So the auric field's about 6 feet. And I love the fact that we were told
Ah,
to stand 6 feet apart. And I'll tell you what, I did not realize until then how much of my own coping strategies were actually as a result of not being aware of how much people were in my space with their undeveloped
yeah.
energy. And so much of it
Wow.
was gone during COVID. It was bliss for me. And so much
Oh,
of
me
this space
too.
graduation came online. But one of the, just in terms of socially, what's happening is really interesting. If you look at, on the science level, if you look at solids, liquids, and gases, and you can have the same, so like look at water, solid is ice, liquid, and then gas. And the arrangement of the molecules in the solid is really all jammed together. It's more spacious in the liquid, and then it's more spacious even still in the gas. That's what's happening to our species.
Right.
If you look at, so before, if you look at, say, uh, concerts and mass gatherings and like football events, you would be like solids. People would be crammed together,
Oh,
shoulder to
right.
shoulder,
I see what you're
in a
saying.
big crowd. How many people do you know like standing like that now?
No way.
Nobody. Nobody, because we're moving into a more liquid, gaseous state where actually we cannot be squashed together like that anymore because our spatial sensitivity has come online. And we're like,
Yes.
actually, whoa, you are
Yeah.
way too close now. Whereas 20 years ago, it would have been fine. We'd be jostling together in a mosh pit or something like that, or at a big happy party with 20,000 of us in a warehouse, everybody happy, sweating on each other, no problem. Whereas these days, people are like, no, thank you. And it's quite enough with just a certain number of people, and our gatherings are getting smaller.
Yeah.
The people coming is getting smaller.
I
And I
just,
think that's just because we're getting
yeah,
more space.
couldn't agree more. And I love that.
Didn't expect to go there on
And I feel
today's
like a lot of
conversation.
us who are already sensitive and like a bit empathic already felt that and have
Yeah.
felt that for a long time. But who I think about when you say that is like all these big families and couples who were, for lack of a better term, trapped in the same house with each other and couldn't have that space potentially. Yeah, that so
But
it
this was that in a way. There are no victims in that sort of corona
oh no,
initiation. And it
100%.
was a case of we were all
But what a
left with our
lesson.
own worlds. I know, but that's it. I mean, for some people, they were left with nobody. And others, they were left with their 8 kids from IVF, and others, they were left with whatever, their abusive partner, and others, they were left in a flat with no garden, and it's like, when I
Then
look at
they
all
were
the
left with,
stories,
they were
oh my
left
goodness.
with
What you said before.
their creation.
Yeah, what the life they
Exactly.
created.
The
Yeah.
the fruits of your own decisions is what you
Wow.
were left with. And it's like,
Exactly.
oh, it's huge. And now we're coming out of that, trying to find how to relate with each other again, but we're all so much more sensitive, but lacking in mature experience of
Yes.
holding space for each other with
Express
that
that.
sensitivity.
Yeah. And
And
how
that's
to
what we're seeing
express that.
relationships failing all over because everyone's so precious with their expectation and entitlement without the compassion for how difficult it is for another human to give that to you.
And to
Exactly.
express your needs and receive what someone
Yeah,
else's needs are
skillfully.
and take appropriate
Yes. Oh
action.
my goodness, it's so
Yeah.
hard.
And so I would say, because we should wrap it up pretty soon, it's been an hour and a half.
Yeah,
Let's keep
Well, you just
chatting.
talk
you're
forever.
right.
So how would we wrap up the language of one, and
But
what
I
would you
think
give
that
the
it's a
listeners to?
natural, yeah, I think it's a natural full circle. The natural full circle is that we're aware that we're all spatially sensitive now, and we're aware also that we may not always be able to get that physical space that we need if we're in a cramped coffee shop or in a small space. How do we how do we take care of ourselves and them while still being accountable and holding them accountable? This is where the language of the one comes in a way to manage the intensity of the strength of those exchanges. Where if we were sitting across a coffee shop and I'm dropping yous in there, it's a bit like I could get to the end of a conversation and all of a sudden you're actually completely switched off from me because you felt accused the whole way,
Yeah.
compared to actually managing your use of I, we,
We,
you,
you,
one,
one.
us,
I,
the whole
we,
range of them,
one, us.
and
I, we,
express
you, one,
we,
us.
you, one, us. That's
That's
it. And,
quite
and
a
to
mantra.
realize it's actually really important which one you use. They're such small words. It's almost like you put them in between the main meaning.
Totally.
It's like it's so little. They're like two and this. Like it's not the main meaning, but it's like actually these are the ones that will determine whether your main meaning is received or whether it causes a chasm between you.
Mm.
So
Wow. And it
and
makes me think of other languages because I'm like,
yeah,
this makes sense in our language. But because I studied Italian for many years, and they literally changed the whole ending of the verb. So you'll have like
yeah,
the root or the stem of the verb, and then the ending changes depending whether you say I, you, he,
yes,
she, etc.
which
I
helps
know
you.
what it would be for one. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I'm like thinking about the grammar, and I'm like, I don't know how you would say
Well,
that in
you almost
Italian.
wouldn't, and it's because this is where we get just a little wrap up that might plant a seed for future conversation, and it is that different languages have different functions,
Right.
and they actually, but to understand that, you really have to see humanity as a whole, where there's only one human, and we're all cells in that human. And
Mm.
if you can see it in that way, then all of a sudden the languages all represent different perspectives from different kind of places of embodiment or
Yes.
disembodiment.
Yeah,
And
for
the
sure.
kind of the more romantic languages are way more embodied and sensual. So you'll
Yes.
find that those languages, Spanish, Italian, French, are really good for sharing things that are sensual and felt
Right.
with the Latin alphabet, whereas English is superb scientific language because it's so objective and kind of
Yeah.
disconnected. And that's why it's actually the kind of the detail that we're talking about is more important in English than in any other language
Really?
because
Yeah, I feel
yeah,
I've
yeah, because there are
intuitive.
no assumptions in English. In other languages there are assumptions and that are all based on different levels of embodiment. And English is a completely disembodied language, which is why it's very
Wow.
useful for international science and business because it's totally disembodied. But the other languages are, and that's why you feel better. It feels juicier speaking Italian or Spanish.
Oh,
It feels more
totally.
embodied, whereas English is very up here and but
In your head.
there's a healing of English, but we're not going to talk about that today. English can heal into a beautifully embodied language, but
Yeah.
that's definitely a
Well, that can
conversation
be
for
another
another time.
conversation for sure.
Definitely. We could do that. The evolution of English. I'd love to. It's a big subject.
my biggest take from this conversation is, yeah, I feel like have been doing that, maybe not with as much awareness as what I have now, but the space things, like, oh, that's an aha. And like, so many parents would benefit from hearing that, and couples,
and
just
teaching
everyone
your
in
kids,
general.
teaching your kids not only the space thing, but what you were saying before, even communicating with your child in a non-aggressive way. I thought about that when you said that before. It's like, instead of accusing them with, you did this, you have to fix this, you know, all of that blame, it's like, oh my God, because it's so shaming.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Even though you might be angry at what they've done and they might have been naughty, it's like what they actually receive from that. It's traumatic.
I just had a memory.
It's traumatic.
I just had a memory.
Really.
When we were staying at a friend's apartment in the city in Brisbane, and Madeline and I think it was Ben, I don't know, they had crayons.
Oh,
they drew all over the wall in this apartment. You've got to be kidding me.
What happened?
Oh yeah, I think I could have yelled.
I think I was going to say, I could see some accusations coming out there.
One of the biggest things, just again for people that are listening, one of the biggest things for me to undo, and I still have to catch myself now, is I grew up with, and I love Mum, but her tone, you know, it was just she, and I was becoming her when Madeline was little. Like, Madeline was 3 when I met Maggie Lamman, who's still a mentor to this day, and she was
the founder of PAC, the Pulsation.
Oh, right, yeah.
We do, yeah.
And really making me see that I had to heal. I was creating my own reality, and I wasn't a victim in this, and that I had to heal my reactions.
And take responsibility and all of that.
And that tone was such a huge thing of growing up. The tone was never soft and kind and loving. It was, and I still notice to this day, I really, when I hear someone do that, say at a shopping centre or whatever, I always try and go into, that person must be in so much pain. Because Mum she was in a lot of pain. She was disconnected, and so was I when the kids were really little. And it was, thank God, I woke up and, you know, things.
I think it's also too to remember on the level of responsibility. It's like, yes, it was a journey, especially for us. But even now, it's like we can slip into disembodiment and have those moments where we get triggered and we're in the heightened emotions and we react and we accuse. And it's like, just having that awareness of when we feel like that and drawing the line, taking a breath, creating that space and snapping out of it. Because it's like, yeah, it's all well and good to be aware of it, but to actually experience it and then experience yourself stepping back from that is like next level awareness.
It is.
And it's something we've all got to practice.
And have you noticed, since I'm staying with Madeline where she lives, and the beautiful people that own this place, Miranda and Mick, Miranda lets me be upstairs. And I have actually, before this conversation, I've actually been giving Maddie space. I've been just staying up here in this space and trying to just let her have her space. And it was interesting listening to you going, oh yeah, I've really wanted to like let Madeline have her space, but it's taken on so much more meaning now. I feel like I've just had this big aha. And I also had an aha moment when you talked about living with our choices, with what we were faced with during COVID.
Yeah, wow.
And because I actually loved that everything slowed down. And I loved, because part of my choices was the guilt around for feeling for Dad and going to look after him instead of putting myself first and doing something else that would have been far more joyful.
Like me. I just legged it over the Queensland-New South Wales border and went for a 3-month road trip in Queensland all the way up to the Daintree rainforest, and there was no one. There was no one. It was great.
And what was fascinating then was because Dad lives right near the city and 6 lanes of traffic full on, right near the airport. Like it's like planes every 2 minutes. Well, during COVID, and the city cats, just that's the boat ferry thing, they're constant. Like they're every 10, 15 minutes. So that's coming at you from all angles where Dad lives. And the city cat was closed down. Nobody was allowed to work. There was no planes in the sky. I'd go for walks. I got captured some of the most amazing scenery of the Brisbane River being completely glassy still. Just and blue skies, no pollution. It was just beautiful. There were lots of amazing moments. And
great.
I stopped using a TV when the kids were quite young. We did have a TV in the home until about 2015, but they were only allowed to watch an hour and a half of it. Sure, I did let them watch The Simpsons. Not so sure about that choice. Predictive programming right there. But, I just didn't buy into all the fear. And we were lucky because I've had this mentor and she was able to share a lot of information and teach us what we're in at the moment, which is, some people might call it ascension, but if we were talking about it from a really practical level, it is this heart, living from the heart, and then also what you're talking about, coming up into this throat chakra, the expansion of expressing ourselves, and the space that requires, the space that we need to have for ourselves, to be that, to become
the love,
us,
who we it can only bloom with space. That's it. It can only bloom with space. Absolutely. For all of us.
You can only bloom with space. I love that.
Yeah. And it's nice to think about too, is like everyone in our healing hub, they're in their own space with tools that they can do their own healing work and get the space they require at the same time.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
And then reach out and get the support when they need it too.
Yeah.
Especially for those that may have that sensitivity. I mean, my wrap up there is really feel the difference in the space between using I, we, you, us.
Yeah.
And if you do that, your own system will tell you more than I could say with a billion words. Because the feeling is there for all of us. The spells have that effect for all of us. It is a science. And what makes it the science of spelling is, and what makes it a science is simply a repeatable method with a repeatable result.
Yeah.
Repeatable method with a repeatable result. And spelling is a science because it's a repeatable method with a repeatable result. That is, and we already knew that on the negative side, as we spoke before, but this is repeatable for other people that are willing to at least give themselves the experience of trying this. You will notice a difference, even if it's subtle. And the more sensitive you are, the more you'll notice the impact it has on the space and on the relational field that you are communicating within. So just invite everyone to go and experiment and play with I and one.
Yeah.
And so this will be a great conversation for that. And then because I've also wanted to share with you just before talking about the chakras, they are science now calls the aura, our energy body, they're calling it the biofield. And there's proof now, or they're saying there's proof, they're catching up, that this is real and that it stores more information than the physical body does.
And the brain does,
And the brain. So so that's exciting. So this will be, and anyone watching this, I'll tag on the end actually the biofield, how to magnify your aura, I think I called it, but it's all about the biofield and how being in the heart, and there's certain exercises you can do, because again, just to wrap up with the feeling thing, whenever I'm writing a mantra about if I'm healing something for myself, or if I'm writing a mantra for singing for the groups that we run, I remember there was this song where I was singing, there was words "my life" or "I delight," and I remember noticing significantly when I sang "I delight" how beautiful it felt.
Yeah, because it's landing in you. When
Eye
you
to
eye
eye.
something,
Yeah.
it lands here. Yeah.
And it really is a feeling thing. So for everybody to just tune in, give yourself enough space to tune in and feel what you're feeling.
Yeah.
With these
Yeah.
different phrases.
Beautiful.
Madeline, did you have anything you wanted to finish with?
I think we've covered it.
That's part 2 of our conversations of spells and power sounds.
In the language of the one.
One.
Thank you so much,
With
Darren, for
Mr.
joining
Darren
us
Deojee,
again.
and we look forward to part 3.
Thanks for having
Darren.
me. Look forward to the next time.
Have you back.